Okay, and we are streaming live now.
Okay, I guess we should just wait until it turns to 8 o'clock in case somebody's running late. Okay. Welcome. Should I do, we're live. I don't have to do the countdown. Okay. Welcome, everybody. First order is to everybody please stand for the pledge. On 3. 1, 2, 3. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, Mrs. Callahan, if you could do the roll call for us, please.
Certainly. Mrs. Johnson,
Here.
Making an exception in this case because of her.
Mrs. Weisberg.
Here.
I think there may be some background. Yes. Mrs. Bays,
Present.
Ms. Brooks,
Here.
Ms. Epstein,
Here.
Ms. Gilliar,
Here.
Mr. Greenstein.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, I am going to move for the adoption of the agenda. Do I have a second? Okay, Ms. Brooks. Ms. Callahan?
Ms. Johnson,
Here.
Ms. Weisberg,
Here.
Ms. Bays.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Brooks,
Yes.
Ms. Epstein,
Yes.
Ms. Gilliar,
Yes.
and Mr. Greenstein.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good evening again. It's an icy and cold winter night, so I want to especially thank everybody who's on watching and going to be participating potentially, because I know you could be with your families or you could be watching Netflix, but you're choosing to be part of this meeting, so thank you. To set the tone, I'd like to share some good news. Kind of like the governor does at the end of his always not so helpful daily email blasts. Since our last meeting, it was announced that 2 Schreiber seniors, Samantha Radinsky and Hope Lane, are candidates for the extremely prestigious Presidential Scholars Program. They were selected out of nearly 3.6 million students, and that was a pretty amazing number. Congratulations to Samantha and Hope and their families and the many teachers that helped them and mentored them along the way. Regardless of what happens from here, this is a wonderful achievement to get this far. We also want to congratulate Lily Dell and Ian Miller, chorus students of John Spezio III, on their selection to the All Eastern Music Festival. These students went through a rigorous series of competitions, really, and they were selected first they were selected for All-State, which is very competitive, and they're vocalists, I should add, which I think I might have said that. They were All-State for New York State, and then they competed with other students, All-State from Maine to Maryland. Now they're going to be in the All Eastern Music Festival, so it's a even wider swath of the East Coast. So fantastic accomplishment. Congratulations to Lily and Ian and to your families and to the music teachers who assisted them in this trajectory. And there's more. The Scholastic Awards for Art and Writing were announced since our last meeting, and we have 7 extremely talented award winners from Schreiber. Before I name them, just to put this in context, previous award winners when they were high school students include, and these are the names that I recognize, Andy Warhol, Stephen King, Joyce Carol Oates, and Kay Walkingstick. Not bad company to be in. Congratulations to Gavin Schaub, who won the Gold Key Award for his comic art and will now proceed to the national awards. And congratulations to the regional award winners, and that is Gabriel Whittles for photography, Robert Pagliaro for his editorial cartoon, Samuel Nakamson for his comic art, Angelina Lavigny for her painting, Emma Kobayashi for her painting, and Abby Hurt for her painting. And of course, congratulations to the families of these Schreiber student artists and to their art teachers, Miranda Best and Chris Murphy. And I only wish we were in person so everybody could hear all the applause that would accompany the announcement of these achievements. The artwork itself is posted on the district's Facebook page, and I urge anybody who hasn't seen it to go take a look at it because it's just beautiful and it's a wonderful thing to see. And finally, Mr. Talbot, a second grade teacher at Salem, who's also a volunteer fireman, and his class crafted a beautiful quilt out of paper to show their gratitude for first responders. This heartfelt work of art was delivered to St. Francis Hospital, where it will be displayed for first responders and others to see. Thank you to Mr. Talbot for your work as a teacher and as a first responder. We really appreciate that. And we know how challenging these times are, and to be a first responder now is harder than ever. And I just a shout out to my Vice President, Beth, who is our first responder and Port's, one of Port's greatest, I can't say the greatest, that wouldn't be fair, but our greatest first responder. So thank you. Tonight
Thank you, Nora.
You're welcome. Thank you. Tonight, we're going to be having a presentation and discussion about two district initiatives. One is setting our vision, mission, and core values. The other, our partnership with NYU Metro to foster greater equity. As Dr. Hines and the other administrators who participate will explain, this work will inform our strategic plan for the next few years. I just want to add that it's critical that we have as much community participation as possible. And you'll hear more about that when we get up to that part of the presentation. Thanks again for being at tonight's meeting. We'll be taking live community comments at the end of the meeting, so stick around. You have to be on the webinar in order to speak. And when it comes time for the community comments, you can press the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, and you will be called on by our web administrator, meeting administrator. Okie doke. Anyway, enjoy the break and please be safe. Now I think we have quite a few meeting minutes to approve, and that includes January 19th, 2021 Board of Ed meeting minutes, January 22nd, and January 22nd Board of Ed meeting minutes. Then we have the February 1st, 2021 Board of Ed Budget and Facilities Work Session meeting minutes, January 13th, 2021 Board of Ed Curriculum Work Session meeting minutes. And finally, January 20th, 2021 Policy and Personnel Work Session meeting minutes. I'm making a motion to adopt these. Do I approve these rather? Do I have a second? Okay, Beth Weisberg. Ms. Callahan, could you do the honors, please?
Yes. Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Mrs. Weisberg,
Yes.
Mrs. Days,
Yes.
Ms. Brooks,
Yes.
Ms. Epstein,
Yes.
Ms. Gilliar,
Yes.
and Mr. Greenstein.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Callahan. Okay, did I? Yes, I did. I did, I know. Okay, but no harm, no foul, right? The report, we have now a report of the superintendent, and we also have the enrollment report. And I don't know, I'll turn it over to Dr. Hines. I don't know if you want to give a report, and then to Dr. Shields.
Sure. First and foremost, welcome everyone. We appreciate you showing up to our board meeting. Some of you may know, actually, you probably all know if you're watching this, you just received a phone call from me regarding Schreiber going remote for the remainder of this week. Unfortunately, we had some positive cases at Schreiber, and we have to conduct contact tracing. So there's good news and bad news associated with this. The good news is today was the first day of our on-site testing. Advanced cardiovascular diagnostics. We had two different locations, one here right at Schreiber at the circle here, and the other station at Sousa. So, we have our staff members who are being tested. We also have our high-risk sport student athletes who are tested as well. But because of what happened today, we just have to be really, really safe. And we're just we're going remote for the remainder of this week. So that notification went out. I would have liked for it to go out sooner than it did, but again, sometimes when we receive information, we receive it, not always before 5 o'clock. So we had to make this call. So I appreciate, as always, your patience and your understanding as a school community. It is very much appreciated. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Shields for our enrollment report.
Good evening. The last enrollment report was conducted on February 3rd. At that point, we have 5,238 students. That's only a 2-student change from where we were a month ago. And from 1 year ago, that's 154 students less than we had 1 year ago that month. So 5,238 students.
All right. Thank you. I want to turn it over to you, Ms. Johnson, only because a lot of the talking I'll be explaining our presentation as you noted before.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I don't have to do those minutes again. That's good. Okay, well, actually, we are up to our discussion items, and there are two. We have the budget presentation, and that's Mrs. Callahan. And I suppose we'll do that first, and then we'll move on to the other presentation. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Johnson. Good evening, everyone. I will share the screen and let's see where we go from here. Here we go. All right, now, some of you may have participated and listened to our initial budget and facilities meeting on the discussion of the 21-22 budget. I always think it's important that we go, I see what I'm doing here. 1 second, please. Give me a moment to find. Here we go. We'll do it this way. It's always better, I think, to know where we are so that we have a starting point. And of course, this year, the 2021 budget, we had a very small increase. It was 1.66%. That was a tax levy increase, which does not always mirror the budget increase, because the levy is going to represent the amount of money that the taxpayers are paying, where the entire budget is made up of tax levy and local revenues. So the tax levy increase last year was just under 2%. The New York State limit that is used in the formula before we consider items such as debt service and transfer to capital, that number was 1.81%. When we were doing the budget last year at this time and into May and almost into June, we would have had an allowable 3.36% levy increase. But because of the circumstances of the pandemic, the board made a concerted effort to assure that the taxpayers would pay the least amount possible while the district planned for the future. Now we are in the future, and we know that this pandemic has caused the district to lose a great deal of its anticipated revenues, such as our programs for adult ed and driver's ed. We were one of the few districts who did not pay its transportation vendor for the months of April, May, and June when we were not being provided transportation. So while it saved us several $million in last year's budget, part of the 2021 revenues that were planned for when that budget was developed was in anticipation of receiving all of our transportation aid. When you don't pay the vendor, therefore you're not entitled to the aid that would otherwise come back to you. So we will be receiving $600,000 less in state aid, but it was still a very good decision on the board's part because we did not spend almost $3 million in transportation expenses. That went to fund balance, and that was part of the explanation of our audit that was done back in October. So those losses are significant, $1 million of our $163 million budget, but we had two very unanticipated revenues that came in. We had both a workers' compensation case where the former employee actually sued the contractor that was involved in that person's injury, and we received a recovery of the money that had been paid out to our former employee. And we also had a very strange situation with an insurance policy that named the school district as the recipient of a life insurance policy. And those two items together were more than $500,000. And the premium on obligation is when the school district borrows money, the bidders will often provide a premium or a revenue to enhance it actually lowers the actual interest on the borrowing. So it shows up on our revenue side as a premium, and we had not anticipated having such a good response to our ban offering, and therefore that came as a surprise. So the positives actually equal the negatives. So that's a very good note in terms of this year's revenue, that we're on target to meet our revenues for the budget totaling $163 million. Now, what we did not plan for and did not budget for, and we have discussed on multiple occasions, are the COVID expenses that we do have to account for at some point before June 30th. And I only bring this up because it's important that we understand that this is hanging out there to be adjusted at some point and taken from our fund balance when we know where we are closer to June 30th. And the board has to understand that in anticipation of what they may use to supplement next year's budget's tax levy. So what we do know about next year is that the teachers' retirement system came out with an estimate of how much we are required to send to the retirement system. That percentage is a percentage of the salaries of any employee who is licensed by the state of New York. So anyone from the superintendent down to a teaching assistant who has a license through the state of New York is in the teacher's retirement system. And we anticipate that increase in cost next year to be close to $1 million. The employees' retirement system is anyone who is a custodian, a clerical person, an education assistant, any of our substitutes in those areas. They are also in a pension system, and the cost at the rate being charged by the system for next year will cause us to increase our budget by about $675,000. There's our health insurance increase for all our employees, which comes to close to another $1 million. Those three items alone are $2.5 million, where the tax levy limit that's been promulgated by the state is a 1.23% increase before we work on our formula that includes debt service and transfer to capital. And that amounts to $2 million alone. So we know that we have contractual increases with our employees to consider. We have our clericals, custodials, and our paras whose contracts expire this June, and they are all in the process of being renegotiated. We do know what the governor's state aid proposal is, which is about $400,000 more than last year. However, keep in mind, in my earlier years doing this job, I never ever would have included, and I am including every penny this year, I never would have included the anticipated federal aid, because what the governor has done is listed out the aids that we are used to seeing, and then below that line, he has taken away $1,127,000. And on the following line, he adds it back as federal dollars. So if for some reason the federal aid does not come through, the district's total aid will not be 10.9 million. It will be 9.8 million. But at this time, everyone seems rather trusting that this is definitely going to happen, and therefore it has been included in my initial calculations of the budget. Now, what do we know about staffing? We have been talking about this a great deal in the central office. We know that we have changes in our enrollment. Certainly in the last 2 years, we have seen a change in our enrollment. And the question is, where have we seen those drops? We do have a number of teachers who are retiring. And is there a potential for attritions, which means certain grade levels could be collapsed without any active employees losing their positions? We're talking about that. When we talk about programs, I think Dr. Hines will be talking later about what is most important, planning on work with NYU and beginning to set the groundwork, a good foundation for some equity work. So I do not believe that you are going to see any new programs or programs eliminated in the traditional sense. We are more saying there is a pause in that area. And Dr. Hines will speak to that more later. Technology, I was very surprised myself by the increase in the technology budget until my colleagues in central office reminded me that I was comparing the original budget to the proposed budget. Keep in mind, the original budget and technology really has very little meaning this year because we put so much pressure on the technology department to provide the appropriate hardware, software, and training for our staff, that when we look at next year's budget, when you get to see the full 59-page document, you really aren't comparing apples to apples, because most of what is being requested for next year, we do have in place now, and much of it has to do with licensing fees. So we will have to keep that in mind at our next budget presentation when you have the full document in front of you. So here is a sample of how I would give you the short version of the financial side of the budget. I'm not talking about the curricular side, the program, the values. I am talking to you about the dollars. So obviously our actual budget is 163 million. I refer to it as sample because it's a number that you will never see again after tonight because the numbers will change. But the budget document that I have on my desk right now is $167 million, which is almost a $4.5 million increase. We have to look at the levy that the community paid for this year's budget, which is $143.8 million. To that, we add the allowable levy increase. The allowable levy increase comes to us, as I keep saying, through a formula from the state, but the basic item that will change this $2.5 million number either upwards or downwards for this year is going to have to do with our transfer to capital line. It is one of the exceptions in the formula. So if you have less money in your transfer to capital, your levy increase goes down. If you have more money in the transfer to capital line, your allowable levy increase goes up. So with the numbers I am working on through the Budget and Facilities Committee, currently the number that is in the draft budget for transfer to capital is $1.4 million. Using that number in the formula, that is how I come up with a $2.5 million sample allowable levy. So we take the current levy, we add to that the levy increase, and then we look at what we refer to as the local and state revenues. That's the state aid, any pilots the district receives, those are payments in lieu of taxes, which we can talk about later if anybody wants more detail on that, and items such as our adult ed programs, our use of facilities, or anything that we generate locally for taxes is added here. We add those three numbers together, we're at $166 million. But the sample budget is $167 million. So we have a shortfall or a gap. At this moment, the gap that we have is $887,000. The point of the presentation was simply to walk you through basic numbers. I can close out the presentation unless anyone wants me to go back to a particular slide, and I'm happy to answer any questions. This is the last item on the presentation.
Thank you, Mrs. Callahan. Are there any questions from the board? I can see Deb's hand. I can't see everybody with the presentation.
Larry and Deb have their hands up, but maybe Mary, it's better to just close the screen.
Okay.
Yeah. just a little hard to see.
Oh.
What's that?
I don't know. It says launch meeting.
Just need to go into unshare
Yep.
screen. There you go.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, Deb, then Larry.
Thank you. Okay, lower hand. Thank you for that presentation. Oh, I see myself on the big screen. Thank you, Ms. Callahan, for that. The 800 some odd $1,000 that represents the gap. Am I correct in saying that it's different this year than last year because of the outstanding 2 million some odd where we had to expend that for the COVID related expenses, and we don't have a clear picture as where we would be at the time it comes to finalize the budget this year as we would have been in years prior because of that fuzzy category of COVID expenses?
Actually, the COVID expenses is not related to the gap because the gap is a reference to next year's proposed budget. I was talking about the COVID expenses earlier because when we make a determination how to fill the gap for next year, more often than not, that includes taking additional money from fund balance greater than what the board may have done in prior years. So I just want you to know that there's an expectation of between $1.5 million and $2 million of fund balance being used in this anticipated budget. And you also have an obligation for the COVID expenses in the current year. We have not pulled any money out of fund balance yet for that because we're trying to get closer to the end of the year to see what remains unspent. I'm sorry if that was too long an explanation.
No, I understand. It's, yes, I understand. Thank you.
Larry, and then Emma.
Okay, I have three things. One is included in the aid figure for the first time is the STAR money. And the STAR money is money that is just something given back to the taxpayers, and it doesn't actually change the amount of money we get. It just is a way of trying to convince us that we're getting more money that we aren't really getting. My next question has to do with the service aid category. The governor has lumped all of our service aid into one category where he doesn't have to grow it based upon our actual expenditures. But Mary, have you done an analysis of what our actual expense reimbursements would have been under the old system and compared them to what the service aid category would be?
We did do that. We are very fortunate for this year that the services aid turns out to be about $200,000 more than we had in the 2021 budget when it was broken down into individual categories. However, as you said, Larry, the point of grouping all of these together is so that when our expenses in those areas increase, we will not see an increase. This number will be frozen. So I don't know whether it was the strategy of the governor to give a little bit extra in these areas so people don't complain the first year until it's too late and say, oh, okay, we got more money that way. But in the future, our transportation aid, our excess cost aid, our computer, library, software aids, they're all lumped in there, and who knows what number will be considered services aid in the future.
But I guess my question, based on the reimbursement aid is always a year behind.
Right.
So what we're anticipating for 21-22 would be based upon our actual costs of 2021. And I imagine if our costs for 2021 are going to be lower than the prior year, they're going to cut that services aid number. But I guess based upon your projection, if we were to stick with the old system, because we spent $2.6 million more than we expected this year. I don't know if any of that is aidable, but if we get 20% of that, that's $520,000 additional that we would be getting. So I guess I'm sort of trying to figure out where it would stand if it were based on the old system. And I don't expect you to have it now. It's just at some point I'd sort of like to get an idea of whether that it's an increase over last year, but is it really an increase over based upon what we're spending?
Well, all of the aids in the area of library, computer software, textbook, they all have a max, and it's based on your student enrollment. It's a dollar amount per student. We have always maximized those in prior years. But what we spent in COVID really didn't relate to any of these specific grouped aids right now. So that we bought those desk shields, we bought desks to separate children, we bought masks galore. And while we did hear that under the Biden administration, they're proposing 100% reimbursement to school districts rather than 75% for FEMA expenses, we had several $1 million and FEMA only honored, well, they haven't even honored, they only let us apply for $60,000 worth of expenses. So you may have said it earlier today, Mr. Greenstein, you said figures don't lie, but liars figure.
Yes.
So you can take that however you want, but numbers can say many things.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Now, my last point is basically for Dr. Hines, which is we're talking about a gap of $850,000. That's based upon a certain top line number of the budget. But that top line number of the budget doesn't necessarily include the priorities of the board or the priorities of the district. For example, we're having NYU come in. I doubt they're going to come up with a solution that's going to save us $4 million and get us closer to equity. So, but yet we're not budgeting anything for what they may tell us to do. So we're sort of wasting that money. You want inclusion, but yet again, it's not in the budget. And every year that I've been on the board, we've gone through this thing. Gee, we want to expand something. Well, we'll have to put it off. We'll have to put it off. And yes, we've done certain things. We got rid of nurse teachers and hired back nurses. We got rid of librarians and then had to hire them back. But in terms of actual growth, we haven't kept pace with what I believe we actually want to be doing. So my question is, if we wanted to have a budget that met our objectives, what would that budget be? What would our gap be then? And what would our tax levy be? Because every year, I keep saying we should have enough money. I have faith in the community. I actually think the community would fund us if we asked them for the right things, for the right reasons, and we explained why we wanted it and how it was going to benefit the kids. But we've always been too afraid to do that. We've always thought, oh no, nobody's going to support us. We have to come in as low as we possibly can, and we just won't do anything for the kids, and we'll just say we're doing little incremental changes instead of making the really important changes that we need to do. We're talking about vision and mission. Vision and mission, again, is likely not to be free. But again, we're not going to be funding it. So we're going to come up with all these great elaborate plans and elaborate ideas. And then it's going to be like, okay, we're just going to do what we did last year and roll over the budget. So anyway, I guess that's just sort of my frustration. And I'd sort of like to know what our priorities are going forward. What can we cut loose? What do we not need anymore? What is it? And if our number's really $1.8 million, well, then as a board, we'll figure out what we want to do with that. I don't like the idea of it's already been decided that this is our gap.
So I could answer that in two different ways. I think first and foremost, what's really important, and I'll be talking about this in a few minutes, Larry, is what does this district stand for and what are its priorities? And that really, I think, is the most essential thing for two reasons. One is when we really create a vision and mission for this school district, it allows us to make really informed decisions. And again, I don't want to put the cart before the horse here, but the bottom line that you're talking about, because I know you've been on the board for a while and you see this ebb and flow of things happening, things not happening. And I understand it's frustrating. Like I think we talked about this at the last board meeting. Like one of the things I want to see for sure is an inclusive setting for our students with disabilities at the elementary level, as does Dr. Allen and probably everybody here. But we also, I believe, need to attach it to something. Like that is the missing link that we don't have that will get us through these really stormy weather right now with the budget. So if you allow me, Larry, I can answer that question, I think, a little more in depth when I get to the presentation, because I really believe what we are about to do is going to transform this school district, not only in the fabric and the DNA of the school district, but how the board makes decisions. For the board to come up with goals, for my goals to align with your goals as a board, and then to have that actually flow through a strategic plan. There's a process in place for things to happen. And I think, and I don't want to speak out of turn, I'm not sure how much of a process was in place before to hang our decisions on something. Maybe it was here, I'm not sure.
But our process there has to be funding behind our process.
I totally agree, but not everything has to cost more just because, and again, I think part of this equity work, part of us talking about vision and mission, it allows us to talk about things that we may not need anymore that cost money. And we may take those monies and apply them somewhere else that we think will better serve our kids. That is part of the process that I'm talking about. So I'm totally on board with what you're saying. But I have a lot of faith in what we are about to do over the next several months. I really do, where I think your frustration hopefully will go from here to here. I really do believe that.
Larry, if I could just add, last year was the first and only time since the tax levy limit has come into being that the school board did not go to the absolute maximum on the tax levy limit. We have always needed every penny that was available to us. And you've been with the district through all the years of growth of student population, and you knew all the times that we needed to add in various areas for elementary classes, and then as it moved to the middle and the high school.
And I brought up piercing in every single one of those years.
Yes, we did not pierce in every single one of those years. You are absolutely correct. I can say, however, talking about this new foundation, that Dr. Mioli did ask for, and certainly it was put in his budget, an extra $125,000 in his special projects code, which I'm sure, which I know because I did go back and reread his explanation, did include dollars for some of the seed money for equity work. What that will be, I do not yet know, but certainly there is some money for a startup.
Great, thanks.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Larry. Emily?
Thank you. Thank you, Mary, for the presentation. I have a couple of questions. When we were talking about the state aid and then the federal aid, that federal aid money that is in it is not part of that 10-something million, correct? It's above it, because I think we talked at the budget meeting of a number of 11.9 million, including the federal aid. Did I write it wrong?
It was the entire amount. Let me go back to my state aid.
Okay. While you do that, the other thing that I want to point out is that in our anticipated budget or revenue on the revenue side for next year, you've anticipated, I think you said, the continuing education income coming in. You've anticipated facilities use income coming in. However, this year, what we had budgeted, I think if I remember back in the slide, and I'm the one who told you to take the slides off. I think in that original slide that you could have, I think it was close to $1 million in revenue that we did not get from continuing education and facilities use. Was that the number? Was it?
It was $1 million altogether, but 600 of it was the transportation aid. So it was 400,000 in local revenues.
Okay, so where I guess the question then becomes, so we were fortunate this year to get this bonus money to offset the loss, but while we're talking about all the extra money that we should be maybe considering as far as our programming that we want to put into place, I think I just want to remind all of us that in the budget that you have right now that does have this $887,000 gap, there is money that we're assuming we're going to get again next year, and we still do not know if we are going to have facilities usage come next year. And we still do not know if our continuing ed program will run, and if so, will it be as vibrant as it has been in the past? So I just want us, I guess I'm just trying to be the voice of caution a little bit to remind us that even though it may not seem as bad, there are still a lot of unknowns that we really do not know. But you were going to check the
yes, and yes, the number without the federal money is 9.857 million. And then if you add the 1.127, which is the money the governor had backed out and says now that the federal government's going to give us, that's how we come to the 11 million. There's a $175,000 state aid for Chapter 721 that I had in my subtotal.
Okay.
But that's how we get to that number.
Okay, thank you. And before I forget, Mary, you know that we're meeting with our state representatives this week and the week after. Could you send me the slide that had the state aid and the federal aid, or send it to the entire board so that we can use it for that meeting on Thursday?
Yes.
So that I don't forget, I'm asking. Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions on the budget? If not, we can proceed to the second item, and I turn it over to Dr. Hines.
Okay, thank you. And Mary, thank you for that budget presentation. I think for many of us who read news, I think it was today, it showed many school districts that are really actually have a significant decrease in their state aid, which is really alarming. And that ranges from large school districts to smaller ones, to ones that we perceive as, more wealthy. It's pretty amazing, whereas some of these school districts have lost up to well over $1 million in some cases. So I look at our situation right now, where it's not great, but it's certainly not as cataclysmic as when we were discussing this earlier in the year. And so I'm going to take that slight thread of optimism, and I'm going to parlay it into this presentation. Bear with me for a second. Okay. I think it looks like it's up. Okay. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. And for, again, those of us who are joining this evening, thank you for being here. In the midst of this pandemic, as day in and day out, we are all contending with significant amount of challenges related to COVID. And we finally have the ability over the next several months to not dwell in the past or even the present for that matter, because tonight we're finally going to look forward to designing our future. And we have the opportunity to reset and to reimagine, we believe, what education looks and feels like right here in Port Washington. Please know this is not about fixing what we have. It's about us collectively rethinking how we can maximize the talents and potential of all the children that we serve. So over the next few minutes, we will discuss two cornerstones that will lay the foundation for our upcoming strategic plan, which is the deep work which will begin over the summer. So this presentation, as I said, will touch upon two cornerstones, developing a new vision and mission for our school district. And the second is taking a deep dive into equity and inclusion for all of our students. And I'll provide, along with Dr. Mioli and Dr. Shields, a 30,000-foot overview of what this entails. So let us begin. As I mentioned before, when Larry was mentioning his concerns, and rightfully so, the board every year over the summer designs its goals for the year. Some of these goals are short-term, some of these goals are long-term. The goals that I'm highlighting right now, as you will see toward the last three goals, I'm not going to read them all, but this presentation will be made available for everyone. It'll be up on the website tomorrow. Have to do with vision, mission, and equity, and opportunity for kids. So of the 7 goals that the board has, I'm focusing right now on 3 of them. Now, with that, as I said before, the superintendent goals need to align, of course, with the board's goals. And so of the 4 goals that I have, 2 of them are related to the boards and what we're discussing tonight, which is vision, mission, and core values. And again, developing and creating a diversity, equity, inclusion task force. So before we start really unpacking what this looks like, I think, or I'd like to think that most of us would agree that working hard is not enough, that, we can hope for certain things, but that certainly is not a strategy for success moving forward. Planning is extremely important. It's one of the things I'm really proud of with our school district. It really, I believe it plans very, very well, and it adjusts on a dime when it needs to. So we're flexible even though we're planning. But one thing for sure, especially with all this uncertainty, is that we need a really solid foundation. I think most of us, if not all of us, would agree that what gets assessed gets done. So we can't just talk about things. We have to, at some point, be able to measure it, to have some metric attached to it so we know that it's doing what it was designed to do and to be successful in doing so. And this is probably the hardest thing to contend with, because we have, opposing, I won't say viewpoints, but perspectives about certain things, especially in what's related to what's best for kids. But the reality is, if everything is important, then nothing is. And that's probably one of the hardest things to work through and to sift through. So our new one-on-one initiative, I have to say, it's, I'm beyond proud. It was really difficult to get this one-on-one initiative moving forward, that's for sure. But our school district, our students, our staff, and our school community should be very proud as to what we have accomplished over the past several months, because it is a major paradigm shift as far as the way that teachers are teaching, students are learning. And it does, and it has addressed some of the equity issues that we have with our students, as far as, opportunities to use technology in a way that's fundamental to them learning. And I really believe, not just me, but our cabinet, and I know our board agrees, that this will assist with our vision and mission work moving forward. So you see some pictures on that previous slide. Here are some more pictures. As you can see, the one-on-one initiative in action, whether it's for our fully virtual learning platform students, whether it's for our middle school students, and certainly our high school, It's being used both in school and at home. And I want to thank the board, and I want to thank the community and everybody else, especially our educators, for really rising to the occasion to make this work. It's been a significant shift, and I think we've learned a lot. So starting tomorrow, actually, we have 2 trains, metaphorically speaking, that will be leaving the Port Washington station. And it's important to visualize this. I'm more of a visual learner, and I think in spaces and objects when I think about how to do things. I want you to think of train 1 and train 2. They're side by side, they're on different tracks, and at some point in June, they will merge into one track, which would be, of course, the strategic plan that will begin this summer. So train 1 has to do with vision and mission. Train 2 has to do with equity and inclusion. So we have 2 different trains. And as I said before, as they're over the next several months on different tracks, riding side by side, they will merge into one. And when we speak about vision and mission, I know Dr. Mioli, this is something that he's very passionate about and very knowledgeable about. And he will be assisting me, and we'll talk about this moving forward regarding this upcoming work. And part of this work is really understanding and us deciding. It's not just me, it's not just the board, it's the collective we deciding what's most important to us, what is our North Star as a school district, and taking a very, very firm stance once we define what that is, how we make that come to be. So when we talk about needing a North Star, we talk about having a common vision, a common understanding, common vocabulary as far as what vision and mission is. And as this slide demonstrates, we could have, and we probably do have, random acts of improvement, and we can settle for that, or we can have focused and aligned acts of improvement, which is, I believe, and I think, again, we would all agree that this is fundamental to making sure that we maximize not only the talents and the potential of our kids, but I would say of our staff and certainly the school district as a whole. Dr. Mioli, is there anything that you want to add to this before I move on to the next slide?
The only thing I'm going to say is I'm just going to piggyback on what Mr. Greenstein said earlier. A lot of the times, and I've been in the district a very long time, as many of you know, and a lot of times we revisit the same issues over and over again because, we don't have those common agreements that can last over time. And so I think in many ways that was a good prelude for this presentation. It'll give us a consensus that we can all look to make those decisions and to be consistent over time.
Great, thank you. So with this slide, we're looking at a timeline from March to May as far as what the vision can be and will be, what the mission will be. And if you look at the questions that surround this vision, when we think about this, we think about what is the purpose of schooling, what are the community aspirations for our graduates. When we talk about this, we think about the profile of a graduate. And I've mentioned that before, and I believe Dr. Mioli has as well several times. It's what are the hopes and dreams of our students. When we talk about, what are some of the things that we want them to really become part of their DNA and for us to really hope for. So that the vision is incredibly important when we think about what this looks like. And really, to be honest, I don't know if you can see me. If you can, we're collectively as a group, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, we're going to read a book together called Creative Schools by Sir Ken Robinson to talk about that and begin to unpack that. Also, the mission, what are the key competencies or capacities that are necessary for our graduates to own and exhibit really right now in the 21st century? So that is something, what are the skills, the habits of mind, the capacities that we want our kids to have. So having a clear vision is the why, the mission is the what will inform all of our decisions about the strategic plan, which is not now. That is, again, that's summer work. And I love this quote, not fixing the present, but embracing the future. And there's a big distinction between not trying to fix what we currently have. We're trying to embrace what we're going to create together. Dr. Mioli, anything you wanted to add to this slide?
I just want to point out, vision and mission are words that are used in different ways in different arenas. And so when we get, when we start to have our first drafts, and certainly in the committee, we'll get into the differences between them and why we chose to use them in this fashion.
So as we talk about over the next several months, what's going to take place, we will convene a committee of stakeholders from across the Port Washington community, and I'll unpack what that looks like in a few minutes. But it's really important as we begin these discussions that we talk about what are the community's aspirations for all of our Schreiber graduates. And that to me is going to be a really healthy and worthwhile conversation, or conversations plural, I should say. And then in the end, we will come to a consensus about a limited number of competencies that are critical for our students. And again, as I mentioned before, that's the profile of a graduate. I'm going to talk about, I mean, those of us who are hockey fans know who Wayne Gretzky is, but I think what made him so great is that he was always racing to where the puck was going to be as opposed to where the puck was. And that's probably one of the most important things I want us to understand as we begin this work, is we want to focus where we want our kids to be and where we want to be as a school district. Dr. Mioli, anything you wanted to add to this slide?
Again, just a quick clarification, and we'll repeat these as we get deeper into the work. But for those of you looking at disciplinary and transdisciplinary and wondering what that means, in this context, disciplinary just means, as about the disciplines, the academic disciplines that we talk about all the time, what we often talk about as traditional schooling. And transdisciplinary outcomes are ones, that we have been talking about more recently, such as social emotional learning, grit, mindfulness, all those types of things. So we're going to look at both sets.
So this is what it's going to look like. This particular committee will be facilitated by myself and Dr. Mioli. We're actually we have our first meeting this Thursday. And our task is for the board to adopt our new vision and mission at the June board meeting. The committee will consist of 4 administrators. We'll have actually 3 board trustees on this committee. We'll have 7 teachers, 5 students, 5 parents, 5 staff members, and 3 community representatives. So we're looking at a nice cross section of our school community. If you look at the time frames, we're very deliberate as far as what we're doing in February, March, April, May, and June. We will be using thought exchange often to make sure that we really listen and hear each other within this particular committee, because it's a large committee, and as is the other committee, by the way. I think they're both close to 35 committee members, and we're doing this all via Zoom. Place when we break out into subgroups and such. But the reality is we want to use this new tool of thought exchange to really extract and to understand what people really would like to see, for our students and for the school district. So the goal by April is to create some sort of status report for the board meeting, and then again in May to finalize what this will look like moving forward. And all of our committee members, I want to thank them in advance for this important work. I really believe it's going to be extremely meaningful. We'll be having a lot of dialogue, and I look forward to sharing with the board what we will produce over the next several months. Dr. Mioli, anything you wanted to add to this?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
All right. So as I said before, there's a little bit of pre-work before we delve into the deep work of creating a new vision and mission. As I said before, we will have some reading. We purchased books for all the committee members, Creative Schools, like I said. It's It's been around for a while, but it has a lot of really great information. It'll spark some great conversations. And I want to thank all of our committee members in advance. So train number 2 has to do with equity and inclusion. And I stumbled across this visual a few days ago. And it succinctly, I believe, really encapsulates what we want to do. Diversity is a fact, equity is a choice, inclusion is an action, but ultimately belonging is an outcome. And that's what we want for every single one of our children. So, the importance of this work, I believe, is undeniable. We want to develop equitable systems to ensure equitable outcomes for all students. We've been talking about this for a while. We want to take a real systems approach. We want to look at everything, not just in parts and in silos. We want to look at the whole system to really incorporate culturally responsive beliefs, policies, practices. These are all the different things we're going to be looking at when we think of a school system. Not just little bits and pieces of it, but the whole system as a whole. And that is going to be guided by NYU Metro, as I've said before. And without reading all the bullets here, but basically, this is what NYU Metro stands for and what it does. Basically, it's going to build transformational relationships with all of our stakeholders. And as we get closer to the committee work itself, and I'll talk about this in a few minutes, we have 35 lead learners who will assist Dr. Maria Hernandez and her team, who will be coming here to take a deep dive in looking at a root cause analysis that will, be working with our lead learners. So they're going to look at policies. They're going to form focus groups to speak with students, to speak with parents, speak with community members. We're going to examine data. There's a lot of things we'll be doing. We'll be really, really busy over the next several months. And this particular team will be facilitated by Dr. Shields and myself. We'll also have 3 board trustees on this team, 5 administrators, 7 teachers, 5 staff members, 8 community members, and students. For both committees, it's extremely important that we have our students part of this process. And I think many of you have heard either myself or Dr. Mioli or others say the process sometimes, many times, is more important than whatever product we produce. We need to have people on board. And again, I want to thank our committee members for this particular committee for taking the time to do this. And what we will be doing is the pre-work, which is part 1, is talking about, well, first reading before we begin talking. We're going to read How to Be an Anti-Racist. That's one group within the 35. The other group will be reading White Fragility. And so you can see from February to mid-March, because that's when NYU comes, they begin in mid-March. We'll have some conversations related to those 2 books, to unpack them, to have constructive conversations, to make sure we are on the same page moving forward before NYU comes here. And then we delve into the deep work from March until May, where we do all the things I just mentioned before. And in the end, we will have a report generated by NYU, and that will be shared with the Board of Education in June. Now, from July, so if you're still with me at this point, you remember I talked about 2 trains. They merge together after the board adopts the vision, mission, and then the equity report. And then we begin what I guess we talk about at more of a granular level as far as utilizing those 2 particular cornerstones. And we talk about our strategic plan and goal setting. So I know I mentioned before in the beginning of this presentation, we want to be able to measure so we know it's effective. We want to be able to set goals, both short and long-term planning, so we design things that we want to see. And this is where I think we talk about what Larry's talking about, as far as what are the things that are most important to us? What are the things that we want to stay here? What are the things that we budget for? It's all aligned to what we work on with our strategic plan moving forward. So again, using the data from NYU's report, talking about what our objectives are, what our priorities are, setting goals for them, and then we begin to integrate them into a strategic plan. If we're looking at this from a visual standpoint, from the beginning of the summer that just passed, we take the board goals, as I started this presentation with, to my goals, looking at the district mission and vision, right? I know Dr. Mioli over the past in the curriculum committee, they talked about curriculum instruction and assessment, well, assessment soon. Talked about the equity work, and then we take all that, and then the board will have the opportunity this July to talk about their goals. They may want to keep some of the same goals because they may be longitudinal. Some of them, like I said, may be short term. I adjust my goals for next year and we focus on the plan. If we look at a timeline, this is just another way of looking at everything that we're doing. This is never ending work though. This is not static work. This is work that continues to grow over the years, but it will provide us with a North Star. It will provide us, I believe, with what we will define, what we think the Port Washington purpose of education will be. And the equity part is what that will look like for all of our students. I try to make that as short as possible, but that's what I have for you. So I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Johnson. Any questions or comments?
First, I want to thank you for that fantastic presentation. Appreciate it. A lot to take in. I don't know if any board members currently have any questions. I don't see any hands up. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Mioli. Okay. Well, thank you. I look forward to all of it. Next, we have our committee reports. We have a Policy and Personnel Committee meeting tomorrow, but I would like to hear from Ms. Brooks. Would like to present.
Sure. So we had our last Policy and Personnel meeting January 20th. We had a brief personnel update. We were in the process of trying to fill Ms. Callahan's shoes. So Central Administration had interviewed 3 finalists who had done presentations during their interview, and they hope to have information to us and to mostly to the public soon. Our Director of Guidance has resigned for personal reasons, and the district office will, I'm just recapping what was said at the meeting at the time, so it was a couple weeks ago, was going to open up the search for a replacement for that spot. And then we looked at several policies. The online distance remote learning policy, central office is still reviewing that. We put the equity, inclusivity, and diversity in education policy on hold, pending the work that we're going to do on the committees and board goals that Dr. Hines just addressed. Our social media relations policy is at our attorneys, and actually we hope to bring that back tomorrow with comments and get that going. And then we also discussed a wish list of policies that the board hope to review. It's something that we usually try to do in September, but with the reopening of school and trying to get up to speed from where we left off last year, we kind of pushed that off until recently. And so we discussed a whole bunch of different policies that we hope to review in the remaining months of the 2020-21 school year. And so join us tomorrow morning at 9:30 if you like for continuation of all this.
Thanks, Deb. Next is the budget and facilities. Ms. Weisberg.
Hi, I am really not going to get into too much detail about the budget and facilities meeting simply because we had a budget presentation already, and I don't think I need to reiterate what Mary already said. What I will say is that we did move our next budget and facilities meeting, which was supposed to be this Monday. We moved it to Monday, the 23rd, same time, 1 o'clock. So there will be further discussion on how to close that budget gap and what we'll be looking at doing going forward. I am happy to say it was exciting to see that the budget gap that we discussed at 9:47 at the budget and facilities meeting a week ago is now down to 8:87. So, you know, we're already making progress. So it's good. We're moving in the right direction. And I look forward to Mary, just keep making that happen every meeting and we won't have to do anything.
Can you do that for us, Mary?
All I need is a little direction from the board.
Okay, it's coming. Curriculum committee, Ms. Gilliar.
So we haven't met again since the last Board of Education meeting, but our next meeting is scheduled for February 25th at 9:30 in the morning. And we will be discussing the issue of assessment, and we will have a guest speaker who has expertise in the area. I hope you can all join us.
Somebody has, okay, great. Thank you, Rachel. Safety and substance. We have been working on the getting the committee together, so I don't really want to say too much more, but we will have a report on where we stand by the next board meeting. Diversity committee, that's a committee that I co-chair. We did have a meeting. I don't have the date. It was actually a very I say we had some important conversations. It was probably one of the more candid and open meetings that we've had. And I think if anybody is more interested, they can watch it on our YouTube channel because it was an interesting and heartfelt meeting. The next meeting is February 26th, which happens to be my birthday, and I will still be there. It's from 12 to 1. So I'm gonna have to start partying after the meeting. Next is the Legislative Task Force, and I'm gonna turn that over to Emily.
Thank you. The Legislative Task Force will be meeting with Assemblywoman Sility on the 11th, so this coming Thursday at 10 a.m. and then Senator Kaplan on the 18th at 11 a.m. And I know that February 18th is a break. However, we're all going to be around, so we'll be meeting. They will both be via Zoom. And the purpose of those meetings is to discuss firstly with them, give them an update on our getting toward our fair share of funding campaign, which is achange.org that I hope everybody has seen. The campaign is closing tomorrow, so if you haven't signed it, please do. When I looked this morning, we had over 2,000 signatures, so it would be great if we can get 3,000 overnight, could we? We're also going to be discussing the digital divide. We're also going to discuss with both legislators the upcoming school year reopening and any mental health initiatives that NYSBA has been taking on. I think that that's what we'll be discussing. And most importantly, we are going to be discussing with them our state aid, which is why I referred to the state aid numbers earlier with Mary. So both meetings will be via Zoom. We welcome the public to join us in the meeting, and we will report to the board and to the general public after our meeting.
Thank you for that report, Emily. Okay, we are now up to our action items. And before I move for the acceptance of items 11.1 to 11.6.1, I just want to point out two things. Well, one actually, it's on item 11.4.1. We have two retirements have been announced, and we are happy but sad for two long-term wonderful administrators who have both announced that they are retiring. Shirley Shapiro, who's our director of ESL, and Bonnie Cohen, who, as you also know, is the principal at Manor Haven School. They will be one will be leaving at the end of June. The other will be leaving in the beginning of the end of August, rather. But in any event, we can, say goodbye to them later. But I just wanted to give a shout out about that because it is. I'm happy for them, but as I say, it's a loss to the district. Okay, action items. I'm going to move for the adoption of items 11.1 to 11.6.1. Do I have a second?
I have a question on one of the items.
Sure.
It is item number, well, it's under budget and fiscal, and it's the one about the cardiovascular diagnostics.
Oh.
And that contract doesn't at the moment, or at least the version we got doesn't include the students. It's just for staff, and I'm just hoping that gets amended before we actually sign it and send it off so that we're doing it. I know it probably has, and we just didn't get the update of it, but I just wanted to be clear.
Yes, we will make sure, Larry, moving forward. I appreciate you pointing that out.
Okay, and I just want to add then for that same, under that same 11.1, it's 11.1.2, that we are probably going to approve the bus contract, transportation contract for athletic and field trips in the amount of $319,000 plus, but that's only gets used if we actually use those services. Okay, so that was a clarification that was made, and I just wanted to share that with everybody who's out there and listening if they're looking at the agenda. Okay.
Thank you, Nora, you read my mind. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm going to move for the adoption of 11.1 to 11.6.1. Do I have a second now? Okay, I see Beth's hand is up. I just see a hand. Thank you. That's the second. Ms. Callahan, if you could do the roll call.
Yeah. Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Mrs. Weisberg,
Yes.
Ms. Bays,
Yes.
Ms. Brooks,
Yes.
Ms. Epstein,
Yes.
Ms. Gilliar,
Yes.
and Mr. Greenstein.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item 12 on the agenda is board policies 1130, 1400, and 1420. And I'm going to make a, this is on for adoption. So I'm going to make a motion to approve the following policies, which are the ones I said. It's the media relations, a chain of command for public complaints, and complaints about curricula and instructional materials. Do I have, is there any discussion? I don't think so. Dr. Shields.
Yes, Board President Johnson, I just wanted to make note that we're making an edit to policy 1400 that is up for adoption tonight. We're removing the final paragraph and the two cross references in the draft policy that you have before you. So if the board is comfortable with that, we will adopt that with those two edits.
Okay, yes, I think we all are probably in agreement on that. Okay, so did I get a, did we?
Nora, Deb
I
has her
just
hand.
wanted to mention, this was pursuant to the school district attorney looking at the document and making these recommendations. Is that correct, Dr. Shields?
That is correct. That's where the edits came from. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're going to move to approve. I have a second. Okay, it's going to be Deb Brooks. Mary, if you could do the.
Yes.
First.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Mrs. Weisberg,
Yes.
Mrs. Bays,
Yes.
Ms. Brooks,
Yes, as amended.
Ms. Epstein,
Yes.
Ms. Gilliar,
Yes.
and Mr. Greenstein.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're getting towards the community comments and any old business. I believe we do have some new business.
Thank you. Yes, so believe it or not, we're at the halfway mark in the school year, and sometimes I feel like it's going too quickly and sometimes too slowly. But be that as it may, over the summer, the board and the central administration and the teachers worked very hard on trying to make a plan to reopen all of our schools. And I would, I guess I need to make a resolution to ask that Dr. Hines, you and your staff review our protocols and our practices in all 7 schools, and I guess central office if you care to do that, and see what's working, what might not be working, what might be superfluous, maybe try to tighten the ship a little bit, share best practices, or just do an overall temperature check, no pun intended, to make sure that our schools are doing the best that we can do to keep our staff and students safe, and report back to us, if you will. And that would be K through 12, please.
Yeah, most certainly. I have that all set up and ready to go with my team already. And as soon as I have something that I can share with the board, I'll come back to you and let you all know.
Okay, we're gonna actually vote on it though as a resolution. Is that, I'm not sure that that's actually required at this point. I didn't think so, but I thought you said resolution, but.
I said resolution because I thought that was the magic word to put it into effect, but
I don't think we need that, and I don't think we need a resolution on this. But we do have a question from Ms. Bays.
I actually have 2 new business items that I would like to ask for the district administrators to look into and report back to the Board of Education. And if possible, I wouldn't ask for it to be reported back at the next meeting because we really don't have time in between the break, but in March, if we could. So there's 2 different things. So there's been discussion and anticipation of guidance coming from the CDC and the decision, for instance, from the New York City schools to bring all of their middle school students back into the building. I'd like for us to see if we can get an update on where we stand and if we have any plans for all in for our middle school or even maybe our high school, and if the administration could give us a report on where we stand and if there are any such plans. So that's one separate new business item, which actually probably falls in line with what Deb just suggested about looking at, how we're doing in K to 12 and how, if there's any practices that we need to change or whatnot. The other item that I want to bring up is we've spent a lot of time as a board and as central administration and as administrators across the district discussing equity and inclusion and that particular board goal. Another board goal that we have, which you showed us earlier, is the board goal of helping facilitate the social and emotional health of all our students and staff, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. I know as a board, and that we've discussed in the past and in curriculum and in even board meetings, the ruler program, which we are putting into play for our elementary school students. I would like to know, and if you could let us know, again, how are we addressing the social and emotional needs of our secondary students, middle school, high school? How are we addressing the needs of our staff? Because we know that the staff is really they're our gatekeepers. And so I don't want us to lose sight of those needs, because I think as a board, we all agreed that they were very important. I know you agreed, Dr. Hines, that social and emotional is a very important aspect of education. So I just wanted to ask if you could give us an update sometime in March on where we stand. Thank you. Those were my 2 new business items. I lower. Rachel has her hand up also.
Oh, I see that. I just wanted to know if
Okay.
Dr. Hines was responding to that, or you shook your head yes, right?
Yeah. Well, I certainly didn't say no.
You
No.
could.
Just
You could.
checking, just checking.
No, and I appreciate you bringing this into light, Emily. So we will have a report.
Okay, Rachel.
I just wanted to add a note on Deborah's request about sort of evaluating where we are K to 12.
Lost Rachel, or did I?
We lost
No,
Rachel.
we lost Rachel.
But and it was so fascinating. Now we're missing it all.
I can send her a text and let her know we lost her. Maybe she already knows.
Did
She
anybody
must know she's on screen. I mean, it says Rachel. Something happened to her. She's gonna have to come. Deb, just tell her to sign out. Oh, there she is. She's back. What happened?
unmute?
Unmute Rachel.
Can't hear you though.
No, she's unmuted, but we can't hear her.
Oh. Do you want to type it? Was it too much to type into the chat? I think you're getting it.
Okay, well, while we're waiting for Rachel, for any attendee that wants to add community make a community comment, we're just going to ask that you raise your hand and we'll ask you to unmute, just as a reminder. That is the next part of our discussion. She left, she'll come back, maybe. Nor should we go to community comments?
Yeah, I was
until,
thinking I'm going to give it another second or two.
well, we could always interrupt the community comments if there's.
Are there any community comments? Anybody who has community comments, please raise your
There's
hand.
somebody who has their hand up. Okay, Kathleen, we're allowing you to talk. So ask to unmute. Okay, Kathleen, you need to unmute.
Okay, thank
And
you. Can you hear me?
thank you.
Yep.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I joined this evening. I wanted to discuss and to say how disappointed I am in the winter sports policy for virtual attendance for the winter athletes. We found out this week that any students participating in the winter sports, the high contact sports, for example, basketball, have to go full virtual. They are not allowed in school. They're being tested. Even if their test comes back negative, they still must remain at home for the length of the season. I was really surprised by that. And I'm very surprised hearing how important everyone is discussing the social emotional needs of the students, that they would be put in that situation. And the parents were given 1 day's notice for this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there
Okay, are there any, we don't usually respond to comments, but thank you for sharing that. Is there any other questions? And I don't know if Rachel has audio now.
I'm back, but we can finish with the community first.
I don't think are there any other community questions?
No.
No, there's nothing else.
Okay, Rachel?
I'm sorry about that. What happens is that I'm on my daughter's iPad and her screen time limit is set for 9:30. And so it locked me out. and I couldn't get back in, and I'm trying to remember what the password is. And by the way, my kids, one of whose iPad this is, are sitting in the background finishing their homework, and they're going, see, that's why you shouldn't set these limits, because this is what happens. Anyway, back to my point. I do appreciate that we're going to do a review. I think that none of us really thought we were going to be able to have a school year where we prevented every single case of COVID, because we just don't have that amount of control, right? People are in our buildings for part of the day, but they're not in our control for the rest of their lives. And people have to go to work, and people have different reasons that they have to be out in the world. And the end result of that is that some people are going to get COVID. And I think in the environment that we're in, I'm still pleased that our rates are as low as they are. I think that we've been pretty successful in making the school setting as safe as it could possibly be, which I'm pleased about, given the amount of money that we spent to make sure that that setting was safe and to make sure that kids could be back in schools, because we believe that was important to them. That said, I think I've raised, and community members have raised, what has become obvious, which is this discrepancy in the numbers of cases between the various elementary schools. And the only reason I'm mentioning the elementary schools only is because I think we're all concerned about keeping the cases minimal everywhere, but we're all well aware that Weber and Schreiber are a little different because the children are a different age. And so parents have a different level of control over them, and there's different activities that they engage in. And there's also nothing to compare those two schools to. We only have one middle school and one high school. But among the elementary schools, there is a discrepancy in the number of cases. And I'm very interested to know if there is anything that we could be doing differently, or anything that we are doing differently inadvertently, that could be a contributor to those discrepancies. I think that I have the utmost faith in our administrators, and I think everyone's doing a really good job trying to control this. But I guess if I had $1 for every time I said this is unprecedented in the last year, I could retire, or certainly pay more than my Board of Ed salary. But I think this is unprecedented, and it may be that something is happening in one building that is making things safer. And it would be good if we could figure that out. It may also be that this is a discrepancy that's just the result of different behavior outside of school hours, and that there's nothing that we can do about it. But I think I really appreciate that the administration is going to take a look at things and figure out how we're doing, assess how we're doing, and with an eye towards, is there anything that we could be doing even better than we are now? So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does
There's a community comment from
okay.
Julie Corin, so I will allow to talk. Julie, you're allowed to talk.
Just unmute yourself, Julie.
Yeah, just unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. Hi, everyone. So I just want to thank you all. I think that the comments from the board members at the end of this meeting were really, really just so on target. The reason I stayed on till the end of this meeting is because I had a lot of the thoughts that you already shared. So just to reiterate, just wondering like where we are in this. I know, when schools were first phased in and opening in September and October, there was a lot of talk of, we're going to keep reviewing this. We're going to keep seeing how this is going, and we will make changes as we're able to. And so here we are, February, definitely looking forward to hearing what, positive changes can be made for the second half of the year. I know I have one elementary school student and one at Weber, and it's painful that my 8th grader is only going into school still 2 days a week. It's super, super disappointing that there are still no students in that building on Wednesdays. And so just really hoping that that change can happen soon and that there is a way to get all the students in more days in the week, if not 5 days a week, as they're doing in a lot of districts of our size and bigger across Long Island. So it really can be done, and just hopeful that some of the feedback that we get, Dr. Hines, is about that. So that was my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Are there any other community comments before we say adieu? I can't pronounce it, but say good night.
Nope, nothing.
Okay. I was going to try to say it in French, but my accent is awful. Good night, everybody. And thank you to the people that are watching, who are either on the webinar, or those who are live streaming, or those who will be live streaming. Thank you for participating, and thank you to all the administrators who are here and my fellow board members.